Monster Kids, if there is one thing we know about the horror scene, is it's full of misfits. We are the redheaded stepchildren of so many subgenres, and when in doubt, we take them all, and they're ours. Tonight we talk about the Cryptkeeper 5. Man, the Cryptkeeper 5. Trenton, New Jersey just produced fucking amazing. Now, I'm sure some of you, if you've never listened to them, you're thinking, well, they're not a horror band. You're technically correct. But you know what? We're from a bastardized scene and of conglomeration of this and that, and, you know, sprinklings of punk, sprinklings of 60s rock, sprinklings of fucking, you know, New York hardcore. Like, horror rock, horror punk is a mix of so many different genres with one overarching theme of horror and sci-fi. And yeah, the CK5 really has nothing on the surface to do with that, but you know, we're such a melting pot, and when other people, when the mainstream, when people just don't want to deal with it, when they don't like it, when they shun it, fuck it, we'll take it. We will take every little bit of it. And in this case, that's kind of what happened with the CK5. With the CK5, their first record, Dear Dr. X, I Want to Be the Creature, it was a horror rock record. It was a horror punk record. Damn good one, too. And fucking super uncommon to find a physical copy of it, which I'd really like to see a repress of that, but that's besides the point. That was they're really, like, they dipped their foot in the 90s with that record, and then it just wasn't them. They followed their own true path and became a fantastic rock and roll band. I mean, there's no other word for it. Dark themed at times, but they're still just a rock and roll band. They follow that Springsteen-esque rock and roll. And the album that they put out after 4 or 5 years after Dear Dr. X was what we're talking about today, which is Trenton Makes the Cryptkeeper 5. I never knew these guys outside of the horror scene. Ever. They just were. They were always there. I mean, the EP that came out that really turned me on to them was Pomade and Switchblades and their goddamn rock and roll. And the artwork was James Rowe, who did artwork for Mr. Monster. Like, he did one of the early iconic Blitzkid logos. Not the Nosferatu, he might have done a Nosferatu head, but it was the one before that. So the tendrils were always there. The friends were there. And we've always accepted the CK5 for who they are. And they've always played with Blitzkid and Mr. Monster. The friends were always there, but like true rebels, they followed their own path and they did their own style of music. They rock and roll, that Springsteen-esque fucking New Jersey rock and roll. Eddie and the Cruisers is a damn good example. So, this was their second record. Definitely a massive shift, like I haven't said that already. Massive shift in sound. Better shift. God, they are so fucking danceable. I mean, they are, to this day, still danceable. When this record was the one out in, you know, between 2002, which the album was released in 2002, and let's see, I think there was a second repress around 2004. Like, that was the relevant record around that time, and they played the shit out of it, and it felt like there were just like a million members of this band. There were actually 7, The main reason they kept the name Cryptkeeper 5, because all rights, they were thinking about changing it between Dear Dr. X and this record. But as we know, Johnny Ramone said he thought the name was cool, and the origins of where it came from, which, if anyone knows, is Mad Monster Party. He loved the name, so they kept it in honor of one of the Ramones. So, damn. Okay, I don't want to get too far before we stop. We'll take a look at the record, and then we'll be back. Alright, fiends, check this out. So, there were actually 2 pressings of this particular album. There was the original 2002 pressing, and it was a couple thousand CDs. It's never been on vinyl that I know of. See all the players in there? And there was a second pressing on a small Florida label of about 1,000. So maybe 3,000 copies of this floating around. And you know, I don't know if I've ever mentioned it, but if you ever really... Get some lyrics here. If you ever really want to delve into a scene, just look at the thank yous on a record. This is one reason artwork is also really important, because if you really want to delve in, go to the thank you section, and a lot of bands list a whole bunch of bands they normally play with. And that's a good way to check out bands. See, Green Goblin Project, Psychocharger, Mr. Monster. It's good stuff. Dig that comic book artwork. Trenton, New Jersey's boys. I remember they had these really great shirts that they were this kind of blue, and they had this baseball style logo on it. I never did get one, but I really wish I would have gotten one. Here's the back cover. Came on King Kahuna Records. Killer record. You should be able to find this one fairly easily. It's not that expensive when you do find it. Sometimes tracking it down's a bit. Everything after this is readily available, though. Just from the CK5 themselves. So yeah, get it. Trust me, you will not be let down. I mean, this is a cool looking record. It's a cool sounding record. Definitely added in. See, one thing you got to know about at least the old horror scene, it's definitely the dynamic has shifted quite a bit. That early scene, there were just influences all over this place, and a lot of it was 50s and 60s rock. I mean, obviously the Misfits stuff was there, but even that was heavily influenced on 50s and 60s rock and roll. So that early rock and roll vibe, it blended so well into what we know and love in the horror scene. I mean, all those early bands, the early 2000s bands, almost all of them had some kind of 50s doo-wop ballad. I mean, look, Mr. Monster's website was boowop.com. Like, they kind of named a whole thing. For a long time, we called some of the music boo-wop. Just straight up boo-wop. You feel me? Really, rock and roll in itself is music of outsiders. It was dangerous fucking, it was a music with a sense of danger to it. And it's kind of fitting that, horror rock, horror punk, spooky rock is still, to this day, kind of an outsider genre. There are plenty of bands out there, but no one takes them serious. Seriously, no, it's almost at this point kind of a running joke. So having that vein of like traditional rock and roll running straight through the middle, and it's tempered with so many other styles. I mean, you've got the Lurking Corpses throwing in death metal. You've got Shadow Reichenstein throwing in little bits of Motorhead, which is based off of traditional rock and roll, but also surf rock. And then you've got the Green Goblin Project throwing in everything else in the kitchen sink, which, go check out the Green Goblin Project, they're amazing. It just, so many different bands. I mean, yeah, punk and hardcore, definitely foundations of it. But I like to think that the horror rock brought in the melody. A lot more melodic music came from this scene. And the CK5 were definitely one of the top bands, still are one of the top bands that bring that melody to the music. Even if they aren't singing about horror-related themes, they're singing about life. Life can be dark, and that's, they're so fucking good. Johnny Ott and DT Graves and the boys, they're so fucking good at what they do that who cares if no one else loves them, we love them. Coming off of Dear Dr. X, they were a three-piece, and like I said, it felt like there were a lot more than 7 members, but at the height there were 7 members. They were definitely a band that keeps to a schedule, and if you can't make it, then you're not in the band. Can you believe that CK5 has been running for 21 years at this point? That's awesome. They might be one of the longest running bands that is associated with this scene. I mean, outside of the Misfits, which are arguably not really together, just kind of whatever. Forbidden Dimension, I'd say would be the only other band that's like up in that longest running category. Mazinga, maybe, because Mazinga still does things. But yeah, this album defined the sound of the CK5, and what an album it is. With organ and saxophone, I mean, it's every bit. Springsteen, Johnny Ott was telling me, he definitely said that the album has a very Springsteen-esque kind of vibe to it. And he's not wrong. I mean, there's a lot of that, but I think it's less of, yeah, the guys like Springsteen, but it's more of like, I think that's just what New Jersey produces, this kind of rock and roll. It's like kind of a working, I mean, we all know Springsteen was the blue collar rock and roll god. I'm not a huge Springsteen fan, but the man has his moments, and he is certainly a good songwriter. I honestly think the CK5 is slightly better than he is, but that's besides the point. I'm probably biased. Now, I believe the record was recorded at SS Sound in Hamilton, New Jersey, for anyone that's wondering, because I'm sure you were wondering. SS Sound was introduced to Blitzkid and Mr. Monster by Johnny Ott, and John Bailey, the engineer there, would back then hang out with Johnny a couple times a week. So there was a lot of friendship and inclusion within like just that early horror scene. Like everybody got together and, hey, you should check out this artist. And I'm not honestly sure who was the first one to meet James Rowe and bring him into the fold to start doing artwork for everybody, which, I mean, James Rowe's artwork is just as iconic, at least in this scene, as Tony O'Farrell's and stuff. Now, this shouldn't be that much of a surprise, but when this album came out in 2002, it was pretty much hated by all the CK5 fans because it was so different from their first record. And not terribly surprised, but those of us who this was our introduction to the CK5, we loved it. I have pictures of me and my friend Rachel dancing at a CK5 show in Dayton at Elbows. It was actually the same night of Nuking the Living Dead and Blitzkid, The Epidemic. I have the flyer right here. It was a fucking great show, and I remember within 2 years I think I saw the CK5 at least once every 2 or 3 months. I mean, they were always out here, either in Indiana, Kentucky, or Ohio. Always out here. Fantastic. Some really good memories bopping around to some of these tunes. I mean, songs on it, Little Girl, Get in the Mood, Evil Thing. It's 10 tracks. It's 10 tracks of just killer fucking rock and roll. I remember them covering a Rancid song one time when I saw them live. This was a show in Cincinnati, I believe. Really surreal show. Super good show. CK5 never failed to deliver on the live show. Always amazing. Now, I will say that when they came out with their particular brand of rock and roll, boy, it was not the time for that style of music. 2002, you saw the super rise of nu metal. Rap was really changing and becoming like the big mainstream thing. It was just not the time. And then also recording this style was, you weren't going to find many people that wanted to record this sound properly. I mean, it's more hi-fi than, say, some garage rock, but it's still like 50s, 60s, and early 70s style of just straight up rock and roll, which there's no other word for it. I mean, I know I keep using that term left and right, but that's what it is. I mean, you've got 7 members, 2 guitars, bass, vocals, drums, keyboard, or organ, as it were, and saxophone. And that sax player played on Blitzkids. Is the saxophone in the beginning of Starlight Decay? Hang on. Let me look the guy's name up. I don't want to do injustice to him. Blue Madigan. Blue Madigan played sax on that particular Blitzkid track, and maybe some others. Just absolutely fantastic. And if there's one thing that the CK5 really tell us through this music is, in the horror scene, be yourself. And really, you can look at any of these bands, but the CK5, like very specifically, be yourself. You do that, and the true music fans will be there. Just like here at the Midnight Chamber. We'll be back with you later. Have a good one, fiends.